with national positions, the politician that would take over a revolution started, a revolution that has influenced the world, and specifically the one in the South, a revolution with the possibility of a hold of the government of Obama, who embraced his 5 children and who's now facing, as in the past, tension with the historical enemy. Cuba is changing itself through time, through moments, at the pace its people need, and the times that the global complexity requires. We arrived at Havana in a pause from his job, under the same scenario of power. We sit face to face with the key man for this island, and from the Palace of Revolution in Havana, Cuba, we greet the President of this country. Thank you, President Miguel Diaz-Canel, for accepting this interview with teleSUR. We are simultaneously broadcasting in Spanish and English. You've been a president for 4 months. What can you say of these months? Well, first of all, I would like to greet teleSUR, the audience of this channel, a channel that is so important in the creation of contents that are required by our America. Well, these months have been a great experience and months that lead me to many insights. After the Constituent Assembly of the 9th Assembly of the Popular Power, where there was a speech where, according to me, was a programmatic one by Raúl Castro, we started studying, reflecting about the directions of this speech. And collectively, we carried out an exercise in the committee with all the members of the ministry in order to see how we can bring this to the work of the government. And we drew many conclusions that we have implemented today. First, answering to this concept for this government to be of the people and for the people, which is also a government for the revolution. So there were 4 fundamental pillars that we set forth, and we have shared them with the people. First, there's example, and then the officers should be able to be accountable for their management in different instances of the government, and mainly for the people. Secondly, the second element is about linking, debating, and continuously speaking to the population, and for us to be where the most crucial topics are, and also when it becomes more difficult. The third pillar is for the directors of the government in Cuba to be able to use as a weapon social communication. So is there going to be a transcendental change? Currently, we're implementing a policy of social communication that has been already approved, and I think it is going to update all our system for the media, but also beyond our means and the media, the culture of communication, the one that the country requires. So the supply of communication, yes, as well as the interaction between the people and the government through the media, through social networks. We would like to create the first stage for us to be present in the electronic government of the country that is based in every digital platform, that from the government we allow interaction with the people. Thus, the participation of the population through these platforms is there in order to make decisions. The population has been critical at some points in their way of communication. Is this going to change? Well, first of all, the Cuban press, under the conditions that they have faced, the challenges of communication through the revolution, well, in this case, the press has defended the revolution in a very professional fashion and as well very efficiently. But we have also seen demonstrations, maybe too much apology in certain points, and sometimes we haven't been capable of providing some ideas of the public agenda. So we need to broaden and to let the people know about the public agenda with the media, but also the role for creating content. As of today, the world content is required, the ones that demobilize people, the perverse content of the restoring platforms. from the colony that they want to propose. Our main audience is the youth, whose communication codes are different than the traditional media. They are the social networks, and these social networks, they are full of content that change and say lies about the reality of our people, and that also change the identity and culture of our people. So we need to be capable, from our platforms of communication, to bring the content that highlights our people. Is this your concern, to be able to communicate with the younger sectors of the society? I think that this is a need of the revolution, and Fidel was the one who started this. He went to universities when he wanted to discuss a topic. There were meetings in the Carenas, the square of the University of Havana during the first years of the revolution. For me, it's been a great need since I was the leader of the youth. When I was the secretary of the party in 2 provinces, and also when I was the Minister of Higher Education. Getting closer to the youth that always brings so much, and knowing what they want as well as their willingness to participate and to propose. So this communication is the 3rd pillar. This type of communication should be there. And the 4th pillar that we highlight is for us leaders to know that solving the problems that we have is very difficult. So we cannot speak about an alternative. We need to have many options for every single problem, every single issue. And President Fidel also said this. The only way to make this more effective is by scientifically researching, and from research, from investigation, looking for innovation, because often we investigate, however, don't have anything concrete. And science must become innovation and be used as the tool for social problems, which could be one of the pillars defended by every leader in their way of working. Under these 4 pillars, have you based your decision to go to the provinces, to meet the people, to see them at the streets? I've seen some images of you going to one of the Cuban provinces, and people give you letters, greet you, they ask you to solve problems. And even President, I heard something that you don't often hear from leaders, the people who are in the government, where you said that there are problems that cannot be solved. This is a means of absolute sincerity, acknowledging there are problems that are beyond us. This is all related to the insights that we had in the inside of the Congress after the speech. We realized that there was a link of the chain that needed to be strengthened with the management of the government, and it was the higher relationship of the central government with the governments of the different territories, with the local governments, with provincial governments. It means because you come from a province, of course, we acknowledge this, and every single Cuban leader that is in charge of the different perspectives should have lived in a province, should have seen what happens in the different provinces, because in the territories they defend life. And national programs, the fundamental programs for the revolution, should also defend and develop their solutions based on the problems of the societies, of the different peoples, and the autonomy that we want to give to local governments under the constitutional project that we are debating. So as I said, we have been speaking about this, about strengthening the relationship between the local government and the central government. The Vice President was given the capacity of having a formal structure that directly tackles the relationship of the central government with the different territories. So governments already in the different municipalities know that they can either come to my office or to the office of First Vice President to look for a solution, or to let us know about problems that go beyond what they can do. In order to complement these relationships, we established, among other mechanisms, the system we're trying to visit as the Council of Ministers. We are trying to visit at least monthly 2 provinces, so that in a year term we have visited at least twice every single province. And also the Assembly is visiting the different territories of our country. This gives the baggage as well as a pool of the different problems that we need to solve, as well as the spectrum of how people are, what's their thought, what's their position, and what's their willingness. And we're able to speak to them. And when solving problems, I always say, first, creating a dialogue should always be an honest exercise, based on truth, on arguments. Have you changed your perception of the problems that you saw in the country after visiting provinces, or have you confirmed the main problems of the country? I think that we have been able to confirm the core issues, and we've also been able to unlock this and to dynamite solutions. I always say there are problems that are so big that cannot be solved immediately, but maybe we can tackle them little by little and avoid them from growing, and we're making it smaller. And this constant attention creates synergies in order to create solutions, and it helps you continue and not to stop. Other problems can be solved immediately. Well, because the reason why they haven't been solved is because they haven't been attended, a problem that is not communicated, and now we have heard from them in a communication and dialogue. And there are problems that we have to tell people honestly that are beyond the possibilities of the country right now. Why? Why is the reason? I think that the main obstacle for the development of this country, what mostly hits the day-to-day life of Cubans, as well as the economy and the social life of people, is the blockade of the United States. This is a brutal practice. I think that is a crime against humanity. It attacks the people. It is a people that's been condemned to die of famine, of needs. It imposes norms, rules, and regulations in the relationship of the world against Cuba that are beyond our territory, beyond our country, and they have been acknowledged right now. And there's also a huge economic prosecution. So the investment flow to Cuba is very little, and it's very difficult, even though there is a lot of willingness, because the government of the state puts a lot of pressure on this, and it's a blockade that has been with us for over 60 years. I can tell you, my generation, I was born in the first years of the revolution, so only because we were born in Cuba, we have seen that our children, our grandchildren, have been living under conditions of a blockade, which also entails resistance. And there's also an acknowledgement of the heroes in our country, a small island that has been blocked by the most powerful nation in the planet, has been able to endure. And it has been able to build its own platform to emancipate from this, and it highlights the needs. And there's also expression of resistance and victory. What's the percentage, in your opinion, by the creation of solutions to the problems that people have told you about in the provinces and also in the capital, and previously the blockade, and what Castro said, freeing these knots, loosening the knots? I think that the blockade has a very, very important aspect. Every time that you analyze an aspect of the social and economic life of a country and you try to differentiate the blockades, most of them are associated to the general blockade, but there are other subjective parts that are related to the behavior, to the way of thinking, that have been conditioned by the lack of trust that has been created by the blockade, and also by the persistence of the blockade, where you have to constantly defend yourself and analyze which steps you should take in order to avoid being destroyed. So then it's more difficult to make decisions and to face what happens in a day-to-day activity. People need to think that everything they do shouldn't weaken the country, and at the end of the day, there's an explanation on the government. Some may say they are obsessed with the blockade, but no. This is not what has happened. The governments of the United States are the ones that have been obsessed blocking our country. We want to have normal conditions. We aren't threatening anyone. We only have a willingness for social justice in order to build a better world, in order to build a better country. And even from this perspective, this need for social justice under the current conditions that we face, we want to accompany it with a society that is prosperous, and the main obstacle is the blockade. Let us speak about the project of the constitutional reform in the next block of the President of Cuba. But let me ask you this. If there would be a fundamental action in order not to have the prosperity that the Cuban people need and that the people have told you in the promises in the capital, then if this is the blockade, why are you thinking about a new constitution? Why are you reviewing this if the fundamental factor comes from abroad? Let's take a break. President, let's go. We are simultaneously in teleSUR English and Spanish. We'll be right back. We are back. Today we're in Havana, Cuba, with the President. In his first interview to the media, we would like to thank the President for his courtesy with teleSUR. And I asked you a question after the previous block, and the question was, well, there's a lot of information that have stated that the Cuban Revolution has shown the impact of the blockade in the population of your country, and it is extremely important. And the answers show what's happening inside. So why are you thinking about a new constitution? Is it really necessary? Well, it brings together many elements of our reality. For them to withdraw the blockade does not depend on us, it depends on the government of the state. So we cannot subordinate our willingness for realization, for social justice, for thriving, to something that a government can exercise as their policy abroad. We are aware that we depend on our own forces, on our willingness, and also on our own effort. And during the last years, there's been a very intense debate from the center of the party in the Congress that has been then repowered by the economy and the society, and we have reached some very important conclusions. We need to update our social and economic model by contemplating the scenario of this blockade. Everything would be better without blockade. That's why we are prepared and we try to do things better in the worst case scenario, which is the scenario of the blockade. And we have made some decisions that update the economic and social model that has been conceived, and we have acknowledged a non-state sector of the economy, which grows. Yes, it grows, and it complements the state economy. And it's not the private sector of neoliberalism. It is a non-state sector, a private sector that complements what we do from state-owned companies, which is also related to state-owned companies or to the state. This is part of the economy of our planning and how much they can provide to the GDP, how much should be invested in this sector in order to produce, to generate services, and what's also the percentage that it has in the workforce of the country. So it is implicit also in our economic programming, in all our projections. So it is also a sector that is majorly committed to the revolution. We have gone beyond. Not only have we acknowledged private property and the existence of the private sector, but we have also progressed with the management of some state-owned property on non-state ways of doing so. So there are some state-owned properties that are given without granting the ownership for it to be managed either privately or by cooperatives. Also, through these times, we have broadened our view on civil rights, human rights. We have fulfilled the agreements that we have signed internationally that weren't indeed shown in our Constitution, as well as the way of thinking of Cubans on topics that previously were taboo or that were understood for a different position. Now they have a different approach, maybe with the young population, and this already, well, we had already started, not creating a contradiction, but creating a limit. Crossroads, yes, a dilemma. From the institutional perspective, with the things that we are trying to experience, the things that we are trying to be based on. So a constitutional reform was required. And this constitutional reform, first of all, reinforces a group of our convictions, of our way of thinking, that keeps state-owned property as the main one, even though there are also other ways of owning property. There's a wider group of rights, and we continue acknowledging the role of the party as the leader of our society. And we also seek, in order to have more autonomy of municipal governments, of being able to solve these problems, of the way in which the central government works, to have a better structure. So it's a rather pragmatic look on the country, on its reality. I think that it's a responsible perspective, an objective perspective, a realistic perspective. It brings new elements that already show what was expressed in the 6th Congress and that was then reaffirmed in the 7th Council. This is part of the economic model of Cuba that now has the legal support from the project of the Constitution, which is autonomy for municipalities. If we are going to grant autonomy to municipalities, we need to get rid of a provincial structure that limits what it can carry out as the exercise of local development by the representation of municipalities. That's why we're changing, and we want to keep at a province level a government coordination, a management coordination, and for the representative part to be in this municipality. So it's a perspective of the state administration, but these aren't the topics that are creating a debate in the Cuban population based on your new project for the Constitution. I think that people are understanding this and acknowledging as a need. They don't see this as a step back, they see it as the opposite. And debating these topics, maybe with the word of the governor, they have to determine whether it's appropriate or not. And then they're wondering whether the country is going to continue being communist. Has the society said no to continue being communist? Here we need to link different perspectives, philosophy, willingness, science, and also theoretical elements that we need to include. Listen, I'm not a specialist in this, but from what I've studied and from the arguments that I have gathered, if you take a look at classic Marxism, the means of production that we aspire for is communism. So communism and socialism are fully related. If you want to build socialism, it's because you want to reach communism. And you're speaking about communism, you understand that you need to go through socialism. So you're not going against communism. No. I understand that both terms imply the other. However, if we're going to have a different perspective by creating a constitution that is closer to what objectively is possible today we're closer, and this is the immediate purpose of the socialist construction, which is a complex construction and a broad one. So in order to aspire for communism, we should also aspire for a construction that doesn't depend on a single country. It depends on an international construction of our global construction. But listen, I have participated in different assemblies for popular debate when we have visited lately the different territories of our country. And there's so much knowledge, so much wisdom in our country, so much responsibility in how people have taken this debate. And this ratifies something that a poet told me once, a friend of mine. None of us knows more than all of us together. And he also told me once, there cannot be so many people that are wrong. I think that the text that we have today is very good. It's a very good constitution, and it's going to grow stronger when we include the different aspects that this popular debate is already providing as an input. And the debate will be based on what the people say in the elections in February. But you also wonder, President, why, if the revolution is being able to revise its construction of a communist socialist society, why don't you review other topics that are also polemic? For instance, the management of a single party, in this case the Communist Party. Why isn't this part of the debate, or was it and we don't know about it? Well, here there's something very interesting that even you joke about. Those who are more concerned about whether to have a socialism or a communism are not the Cubans, are the ones from abroad. Those who have a clear perspective of communism or socialism, those who have always attacked us with this, and they show the double standards that they keep when they try to tackle the reality of Cuba, and they don't speak about this. I think that every single topic of the Constitution are up for debate. Some have a greater majority that is settled, while others have a minority that doesn't agree with it, and others that create a consensus because there's different opinions for them. The managing role of the Communist Party in our society is supported by the majority of the people. We're not waiving it. And it's also related to a basic foundation, a historic foundation. And this is often not seen in the reality of Cuba, because we often try to see the role of the Communist Party in our society as an electoral party. And it's not an electoral party in Cuba. It is related to the historic foundation. It was founded by Martí, and this is the basis of the Communist Party of Cuba today, from the historical perspective of it. Not trying to create a party for election, no. Martí tried to create a party in order to face the revolution, in order to defy the revolution that was going to bring independent sovereignty to our country on the basis of unity. A party that was going to be totally open and democratic in order to include the interest of the majority based on the independence and the sovereignty, and that would not have the possibility of being broken. In our history, unity is clear, and necessary union. When you see our history, whenever there has been gaps in our unity, when it has been fractured, we've had problems. We've seen the problems happening there. The first independence war, the 10-year war, it was a very long war. Its beginning, it's going to be celebrated in October, 150th anniversary. And also, in the 100th anniversary of the beginning of this war, Fidel said something: there's been a single revolution in Cuba. That's why continuity is very well conceptualized. And this revolution didn't only create the beginning of the independence war. It wasn't only the beginning of the independence war, but also the beginning of the struggles of the Cuban people. And it's been a single struggle. The 10-year war was a long war, but very heroic. And it didn't end with a victory, because there wasn't any unity at the end, and there was finally an agreement with Spain. Then there was another campaign for independence, and a war that was called the Small War, Guerra Chiquita. It didn't grow bigger because of this as well, the lack of union. Then the independent efforts of 95, where we already had a concept of thought, of the political thought of José Martí, with the participation of the Revolutionary Party of Cuba as the axis, as the leader of this war, and it finalized with the intervention of the United States, with a republic that was under the media due to the lack of union. And based on this, there was a revolutionary movement, a progressive one, with deep convictions that brought the vast intellect and the best of the youth in Cuba. It happened during the 30s. It was called the Revolution of 33. And there was a saying: it also lacked unity. And the revolution triumphed with the convergence of different forces. Fidel unified these forces and followed them through a long process of revolution during the first years within the unity inside the Communist Party of Cuba. So it's not a party for elections. It is a party of a revolution. It is a party of the people. It is a party in order to reach unity. I am convinced that the enemy of the Cuban Revolution knows that the main target to breach revolution, it's to fragment our unity, and that's how they target their main proposals against us. And where are they targeted? To which sector of the population? Towards the youth. Why? Because today there's a generation where there's a time difference of over 60 years already with a historical moment when the revolution won. So it is a generation that has already assumed the achievements as a right. The achievements, they see them as natural. They're only natural for them. They didn't go through the first years of the revolution. My generation is a generation that felt the first harsh years of the revolution. They saw the progress of the country with the revolution, and we had a stage of a lot of stability in the 80s, and then, ever since the end of socialism, we underwent the special period. But the current youth, they were born during the special period, and they have lived through it. So we need, in order to put this together, is this generation president looking for more diversity, for different parties, for different media, for different proposals to communicate and connect with globalization? Well, they do have a lot of convictions. They want the country to develop faster because it has been a generation educated by the revolution. They've had the benefits of education, general education, secondary education, university education. They've been able to take over the culture. So it's a very well-cultured generation. It's educated, and they, of course, have convictions. It is an active generation, a generation that participates. And I think that what they aspire to is not to be against the party or to be against the revolution. And it's an important part of this revolution. They do identify with the revolution and with the party. So this is not their concern. Their concern is to have more progress, to accelerate these processes. Their concern is to be part, to participate, and to provide more inputs. They also aspire for technological development, about the development of IT. It is also very prone to social communication. So do you think they want more diversity? They also have diversity as a generation, but it's a generation that is also aware that they would lose all the benefit that was given to them by the revolution if we would lose unity. So it is a generation that is firm, that is strong. They don't want any divisions. They will not stop in order to break, to stop the revolution. And it's also a generation that has their own beliefs. They defend the revolution, the independence, the sovereignty, and they want to consolidate it. And it is a generation that will continue with the revolution. I have two more topics to discuss about the internal debate on the new constitution. First, the limits of property and wealth, which I consider extremely interesting. And based on the comments on the social network and different places we have spoken about this, this has led to many thoughts. And also same-sex marriage. We're going to speak about this in the next block. I want to listen to the opinion of the President of Cuba. But the third and last block of this talk will be about international topics and to come back to the crossroads and to the structural relationship between this country and the United States. Would it be possible to have a meeting between Diaz-Canel and Trump? We're going to listen to this next block. We'll be right back.
We are in teleSUR, simultaneously broadcasting for teleSUR Spanish and English in all platforms, speaking with President of Cuba in the Palace of the Revolution with President Miguel Diaz-Canel, who has allowed us to interview him for the first time on the media. And their first two blogs have been about the internal topics of the debate that is happening within the Cuban society, which didn't start with your government, but that, of course, now see you as the protagonist for these discussions. And within the different topics that the new constitution will bring, there are two that create contradictions, and also there are many people speak about this, which is the limit of property and wealth. What's your position on this? Well, I don't want to have an opinion based on my particular saying, because I am part of the commission directed by the General of the Army that was under the responsibility of the Assembly to create the process, the project for the Constitution. So I agree with everything in the project, but I am also open, and I can agree with everything that can be improved in this constitutional project by adding to it whatever the people can say. Now, this is related to the things that we were speaking about previously, the youth and also the rest of our people. There's a very big pressure of defending the concepts of social justice, of equality, the ones that have been built by the revolution. Therefore, people legitimately, I think that it's a legitimate position, are very concerned about the concentration of wealth and property. Is this happening in Cuba? Has this happened with the implementation of the economic model? Well, I don't think that there's a favorable environment to concentrate wealth and property based on a regulation and our provisions and how we work as a country. But within the current economic situation, where the salary is no longer as it was, where the relation between the salary and the prices are difficult to manage, and then we come back to the blockade, where people have some income not necessarily related to their work. And we believe that work is the main path by which individuals can do and be paid based on this. So the people with these aspirations that are all legitimate define the lack of concentration of wealth and property. But there's one article that explicitly states that there will not be any accrual of wealth. And when this was drafted, we always said that by impeding this from happening, we were not going to allow wealth to be concentrated in a factory. So we would be able to control property and wealth as well. People want us to emphasize that there shouldn't be any concentration of wealth, and that explicitly state that there shouldn't be a concentration of wealth. I believe that debate in the Constitution, people aren't only providing elements for this text, but also things that should be considered in the future to see how we can implement the Constitution with laws. Yes, with the law. We need a legislative exercise that we are preparing for already in order to draft and set for approval those laws that should support the Constitution in order to avoid any legal gaps. So now we're debating and understanding what people are saying about what should be part of the Constitution. So these are the highest needs, but then brought to laws that show the details as well as the procedures that support the law. So our main discussion, I guess, well, we have been discussing about this for already a month, but we're still requiring the input of certain sectors, as the students, as the youth, as the academia, because now we're starting with the school period. Yes, we have. But this is an article where we will need to draft things better, because we do not have any contradiction with its content. We all agree that we need to limit the concentration of property and wealth, but the discussion is what should be stated on the Constitution or what should be part of laws and procedures. And here, just like in every other place, debate and popular wisdom will be the one with the last word. President, did you imagine the reaction of conservative sectors in Cuba due to the appearance of the new constitution, the acknowledgement, the civil acknowledgement with civil rights to marriage, same-sex marriage? Well, this is a debate that has taken place during the last years because the country has changed. And also thought has changed. The country evolves. We are in the bubble. We're isolated, and we are facing realities. And I think that the emancipation will of the revolution also broadens the thought. There's humanism based on the performance of the revolution, and thus, during the last years, during the years that we have been through, there is a great evolution of thought. Many taboos have been broken that previously were things that were carved in stone, and now the youth is also pushing for this because they have a different perspective for different social problems. Listen, based on the criteria that I am stating about a specific criteria, I don't want to go against the debate. Well, but the church has publicly stated their opinion on this article, so it's important to hear. Well, I have my own perspective, I have my own convictions, but I am also open to what people are saying, because we haven't done this because we have artistically crafted a fake scenario. No, we have done this due to our conviction, because the history of the revolution, every time that we have asked for a referendum, we have strengthened the action of our revolution. So, do you agree with it? Yes, I agree with it. I mainly believe that the approach of acknowledging marriage of people with no limitations answers to a problem of eliminating any type of discrimination in society, of not leaving any gap to any type of discrimination in our society. So now, with this willingness, people can now see different aspects that are related to the acknowledgement of this type of union or marriage. First, they defend the perspective of semantics of the origin, where the word marriage comes from matrix, and if that's the matrix, it requires a mother. It's a concept that for some people is sacred, and it's valid for people, and it is respected, of course, while others have their own concerns based on other aspects that are related to this adoption of children, the responsibility of this marriage, and the family responsibility, as well as civil rights. Yes, civil rights. And there are other perspectives that also show certain aspects of the culture of people, of their thought, of their way of thinking, of people who follow a tradition. So I think that being honest as such, they're also showing the different perspectives that they may have. At the end of the day, I go against any type of discrimination, and this is one of the types of discrimination that oftentimes haven't been established by law, but that has been part of the behavior of our society, even though we have progressed a lot during recent times, and that there are people and institutions that have played a very important role in order to widen our horizons based on the understanding of the social problems, which are also issues that happen around the world of the humanitarian conception. But also, let me tell you that the referendum is going to define this, as well as the wisdom by which our people build a consensus on this particular aspect. Those against the revolution are asking to vote against the project of the Constitution. Well, I think that the opinion in a citizen experience as important as this, as opinion, you could be pro or against a given article, but as a whole, as the Constitution, we need to take this responsibility, because if we call for dialogue, dialogue includes different parties, at least two people, so I cannot believe that my ideas are the only ones right. Other people may have other ideas, but then at the end of the day, I do what the people, what the country want to build, not because I am stubborn, or because I am trying to say that if they don't include something, a part of the articles are not even the most important, I will go against the Constitution, or I will dim the Constitution. non-favorable because of this. We need to understand the role that we have as citizens, specifically when we've seen the possibility of doing all this. So, do you think that people will vote for the Constitution in February? I think that most of them will say yes, because debate is not an imposed conviction. It's the exact opposite. You were speaking about the counter-revolution. Remember the counter-revolution in Cuba? The minorities that are against the revolution in Cuba, they don't answer to a national project. They don't want to improve the country from a perspective of sovereignty and independence. This counter-revolution is just one that be annexed. They are paid, financed by the government of the United States, undercover, of course, or in other cases, overtly. And they have very little perspective. They can participate, they can be part of the assemblies. They're people, they're members of our country, even though many of them would rather be out of Cuba. But they aren't acknowledged, they don't have any social support. And generally, when they show their ideas, when they speak against the people, against the revolution, people also show their perspectives against them, against this position. Listen, I've participated in 6 debates, in 6 meetings for debate. One with the foreign press that is always sincere and that speaks about the reality of Cuba. And when there was a constitutional project in Cuba, people start saying that mainly the youth were apathic about the Constitution. They didn't care about it. Now, there have been 3 different tabloids of the referendum, and we ran out of stock very, very soon. Even in some communities in the hills, people want to get this tabloid. We ran out of stock. People are always staring the tabloid. People draw the symbols or the signs, whatever they do. They have studied the text, of course. They have studied the text. They have underlined certain parts. Well, I thought, based on my engineering background, so I created a block diagram, and people participate in a very nice, friendly, but also serious way, and very committed with this debate. So if someone doesn't care about this, then why do they want this tabloid? Why do the majority want? So do you think it's a structural debate, the one that we have in Cuba? Yes, this is another element for debate. Many people, specifically the elder, they see the Constitution as important not only for the country today, but also for the future. And they also are concerned about how the Constitution brings the youth the space they require. And this shows that there is a commitment with a continuity. And also, the way in which the youth participate, and they bring to the table many interesting ideas, but many young people in many assemblies, and one of the first interventions that we had was a young person that goes beyond what the Constitution says, and he showed his support to the Constitution from his perspective as part of the youth. We're going to see what will happen in February, President. And Patricia, I would like to tell you an anecdote. This was carried out in the most sincere of ways, trying to avoid the imposition of this during an assembly. And then there was a positive answer in the people. I was in a working center, and then there was this person who wanted to broaden an article, but I wanted to keep this clear and of course respecting his perspective, and I told him, please, the only thing that I am asking is for you to take a look at the following article, where I think that what you were proposing is included, and this is perfectly legitimate. Please take a look at it and see whether it is defining the other one or we should add it to this one, but I am eager to do this, and I want to tell you that it is also included. He read the tabloid, and then he answered. The president told me this, and thus I no longer have to say this. And I told him, no, don't do that, because your conviction is important. This is how we're building. State what you have to do, because doubting something or being alarmed about something will also help us think whether certain things should be stated in more than one article. Should they be pondered here and also there? I always check Cuba Debate every morning. I also check other media, but I always read Cuba Debate, especially the comments. And there was a worker of that center that had written that there was the exercise of democracy. What a great exercise of democracy of my country. When a worker speaks about something, the president answers, and then the worker is eager to continue. I'm not doing this as a personal topic, because this is not only what I do. All our people work like this, and we create an environment for an honest debate in respect of everyone. And this leads us to this consensus that in some points, some people who don't know the reality cannot understand how the revolution, under so many problems, still keeps the majority, and this political consensus that is still a challenge for the future. President, during this interview, we have spoken about the internal reality and the internal debate, because both inside and outside of Cuba, there is a lot of expectations and concerns about what's the destination of the revolution, what's going to happen with this. But of course, it's going to be led by your international relationships. There is a lot of expectation based on your participation in the General Assembly of the United Nations during this month, where you will be in the United States in such a structural relationship between Cuba and the United States. There were some changes. There was a transformation together with Obama's administration. The arrival of Trump changes this relationship. But at what degree? What is the current state of affairs of these relationships? Fidel stated that history had the answers to our challenges. Listen, since the beginning of the revolution in Cuba, we always opened a possibility for dialogue with the government of the States, and this was established by ourselves, by Fidel. And the people of our country believes this. Our problem is not with the people of the United States. We cherish the people, we admire them, just like we do with the people in South America. Our conflict, the differences are not with the people in the United States. No, they are with the government, due to the way in which they have acted against revolution. And in 1959, the first year of the revolution, with his first visit, Fidel, after the revolution, he went to the States willing to speak to the government of the States. And immediately after the triumph of the revolution, the government of the States denied Cuba this dialogue, and in the worst of ways, even by approving an invasion to Cuba, which was of course a failure, and that what then was defined as the first great defeat of imperialism in Latin America. But dialogue is built with two or more people. So dialogue also has rules. You cannot hope to have a dialogue when people are unequal, when one party is the hegemonic party, shows pressure. You cannot have dialogue when one of the parties conditions the other for you to resign your sovereignty, to waive it, to resign of your independence, to say no to it. It's impossible to establish a dialogue when one of the parties demands for you to be subject to their demands. And this is what Trump demands? Yes, these are the demands of Trump that they have always been throughout all these years in the practice of the policy of the United States. When was it different? During the last stage of President Obama's administration, and through a long period of talk and dialogue, I think it was a respectful dialogue. We opened space to reestablish relationships. It was a process that we always thought was going to be long, because the way in which they acted created a lot of lack of trust, and we started trying to reestablish relationship while there's still a blockade. But there was a greater perspective of Cuba for more investment. Well, let me speak about this. At that moment, we reestablished our relationships, and we started being headed towards a process that was going to be, of course, the longest part of reestablishing this, which was standardizing things and making things the standard and normal. First, needed to eliminate the blockade. And during the first stage of establishment of relationship, we were able to progress, and we achieved to systematize our contact in different topics with the government of the States. The embassies were open in both countries, and we started trying working with something that Raúl defined perfectly, according to my perspective, where we could have a civilized relationship regardless of our differences in ideology. These things were not going to change. Our ideology is completely different to the one that the government of the state keeps, but we were able to speak, to collaborate. And on the other hand, there's an important sector in the state that wants to keep relationship with Cuba and wants to invest in Cuba. There's an important sector of the agricultural sector of the state that also wants to keep this relationship with Cuba. Also an academic sector, a scientific sector that wants to keep relationship, to open relationship with Cuba. And there's also exchange. But how important are these sectors in order to change the position of Trump? Well, I think that the blockade, listen, those that have the faculty of getting rid of the blockade are not the presidents, are the Congress, the congressmen. Obama was more open to this, not as Donald Trump, the current president of the state. What has the current president of the States done while we were progressing with these relationships? Well, in November, he established measures that are completely unacceptable in the relationships with Cuba. These measures, from our perspective, have been mandated in order to comply with certain commitments with the mafia that is against Cuba, that lives in Miami, and we of course know what's their position historically around our revolution. That the measures that Trump created in November are against the opinion of the majority of the Americans. The last surveys of their state about their position on Cuba and about the relationship with the blockade in the great majority are against the blockade. They are against the possibilities of Americans, of citizens of the United States. They are limited to visit Cuba. They are alarmed or alerted when visiting Cuba that they should not visit this country. They tell them stories about our country that would try to tempt them away from Cuba. The entrepreneurs are also limited to keep relationships with some Cuban companies. They limit citizens to visit Cuba and the Cuban families to meet again. And this perspective is going to change during Trump's era. Can we have an approach? Well, it limits Cuban as well to visiting states. There's a limit now of presence of Cubans in the embassy. You've been accused of sonic attacks. Did you have any sonic attacks against the United States? They have included some paperwork for visas that need to do with other countries that make this so complicated and so entangled. They have threatened us again, they have imposed things, and in the midst of all this, they have created fake news and fake stories about acoustic attacks that they have called acoustic attacks. We haven't attacked anyone. We don't violate the rights of any diplomat. If there's a place where the rights of diplomats and foreigners are respected, is in Cuba. They have scaled this up. They started with a story, and then American and Cuban scientists, of course, said that this was a lie. Did your government requested help of the Russians in order to attack the diplomats? No. We are too ethical to do so. We don't have an expression of attack. We, above all, defend from attacks. We have been attacked very often. We have been the victims of terrorist attacks. We have been victims of a blockade, which is also an attack. We have also been victims of campaigns against ourselves on the main leaders who have been treated, who have been mistreated, and they have also attacked us. They have been attempted to be murdered. Cuba shares. Cuba always wants to contribute to build a better world. Undoubtedly, we need to acknowledge that relationships today are taking a step back. We still have some channels open for dialogue. And what's our position? I think this is very interesting. We have never been against the possibilities of opening a dialogue. We want to have talks, but this should be a talk between equals. We should be respected. This should be a dialogue where we are not conditioning our sovereignty, our independence, or relationships with the countries in the rest of the world, because we will not accept any impositions, and we are not willing to have any concessions in principles and in the relationships with the other states. So your perspective will not be to not have any communication. Listen, if this attitude continues of the government of the States against Cuba, then there will not be any dialogue, because dialogue should be seen from both perspectives. We should ask them if they want to keep a dialogue with us. We should ask the President of the States if he wants to speak with Cuba. And if he wants to speak with Cuba, it cannot be from a position as his. President, I would like to say more things because there are some structural topics that deserve more time. The relationship of Cuba with Venezuela. Cuba showed their position. It was one of the countries that first showed their support to Venezuela after the attack against Maduro. What's your perspective? What's going to happen with Venezuela? Listen, you know about this, and we love Venezuela. And I think that every time you analyze the situation of Venezuela and the perspective of their situation, the first feeling that floats for us, beyond our love for Venezuela, for their people, for their history, for their leaders, is also the acknowledgement and our respect for what Venezuela has done. First with Chavez, Venezuela was able to change the tradition that depended on a country that needs to play a very important role in Latin America, due to its condition of being a country that has so much wealth, and also due to its history. And then Chavez broadened the horizons to a new country, to a new Venezuela. Chavez, in his friendship with Fidel, his relationship with Fidel, that for Cubans was also a unique relationship, and there was a reason behind it, because the people and Fidel thought about this. They thought that Chavez was his best friend. They were able to transcend not only for a project of Venezuela or a Cuban project, but for a project of Latin American integration that was shown in different places with ACLAC, with UNASUR. Have they been wounded? And Patricia, you're asking faster what I'm able to answer, and it's a very good question. You're very professional with your task. Thank you, President. Thank you very much. Listen, so let's contrast Venezuela before Chavez and Venezuela with Chavez. I think that the Bolivarian people, the Venezuelan people, have seen so many benefits, so many wins that they have participated in. And these wins have been translated, have been shared with the rest of the countries of Latin America, with these mechanisms for integration that are also challenging as the ones that you have previously asked about. And the States always attempted through all means possible to overthrow Chavez's government, even with the most perverse practices. Remember that Chavez, there was a coup. There was a coup attempt against Chavez. He survived this coup. And Chavez continued being a very, very important leader for Venezuela, for Latin America, for the world. Chavez was a leader legitimately elected as a president in many processes, in elections that have been acknowledged by the international community as honest processes and clean as well. Then Chavez passed. He passed away, and Maduro came after him, a working president. And what was the imperialist thinking about this? That the working president was not going to be able to endure the pressure, that the president was not to be able to keep the legacy of Chavez. But then they were struck with reality. I think that Maduro is a consequent leader with a great commitment with Chavez's legacy. If you analyze this based on the current events, you can see that Chavez wasn't wrong when he proposed the candidacy of Maduro. And the union between the military and the citizens, Maduro, the Bolivarian Revolution, the people that have been attacked in the highest expression of an unconventional war by using media campaigns that go against the people, that create mistrust, and using violence and looking for more violence within the society of Venezuela in order to destabilize it, and also carrying out a blockade. There's not a clear one, but of course there's an economic blockade against Venezuela, there's a financial blockade against Venezuela, there's an oligarchy in Venezuela, and the right wing in Venezuela that doesn't want to share the benefits of this win with the people. And what has Maduro, the government, and the board against this? They have endured all these attacks, and they will continue enduring. They will endure, and they will defeat. And I think that they're enduring, and they're also winning, because they have been constantly able to find a perspective in order to go over these hurdles. And I think that this has changed the perspective of the Venezuelan right wing that today doesn't have any option, and also against the oligarchy of Venezuela, and also against the government of the states for them to take their position against Venezuela. And what shows this, of course, the attempt to kill President Maduro. If you are to analyze this, you can say here there are two things present. First, trying to kill a president shows impotence against the triumph of the Bolivarian Revolution. And on the other hand, the silence about this crime shows that there is complicity. What's going to happen for this country after this attack? They're going to try to keep on pressuring. They will intensify them. They will try to create fractures in Latin America for others to be part of this pressure. They will condition Latin American countries, and we know that they have brought people in different members of the Trump administration trying to pressure the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean and to look for a position against Venezuela. But you know something? People are fair, and most of the fair governments acknowledge what Venezuela has done. And this is also related to one of the questions that you asked. They have also tried to divide, to fracture unity through the integration mechanisms. Ecuador is no longer part of ALBA, Colombia is not part of UNASUR. That's why I asked this question, President, because Venezuela has been a part of this. Listen, Patricia, everything that's happening around this is a demonstration of a neo-colonial platform, a neoliberal platform that the States is trying to impose for all Latin America, because they didn't wait to the conquest of the Latin American people in a decade where there were many social processes and revolutionary processes. They weren't armored enough, President? I think that the revolutionary processes were armed, but there's complexities here. Mainly when you try to change the economic measures of capitalism. Americans don't want Cuba to happen again in any other place of Latin America. Remember that during the first years, the opposition, the oligarchy of Cuba went to the States, and they are fighting the war from their states. In Venezuela, the oligarchy is still there. The counter-revolution is inside the country. It is supported from every perspective by Trump's administration. But now what? What did ALBA TCP meant? I think that no process of integration of any sort regionally in such little time was as successful as ALBA. Remember that with ALBA, just in a couple of years, 4 countries were able to eliminate literacy with the Yo Si Puedo method that was provided by Cuba. And what happened with ALBA in 4 countries is still the dream of many peoples, of many countries in the world. I always think to myself, Cuba, when the revolution won, was declared a country free of illiteracy. More than 50 years had to go by for other Latin American countries to get rid of the sequela of literacy. And how was this managed? With integration, collaboration, cooperation, backed with solidarity, the solidarity that we want to have. So that the way in which the world is globalized changes. We don't want a globalization under hegemony. We want a globalization with solidarity. But if this is so good, why is Ecuador withdrawn from ALBA and Colombia from UNASUR? This supportive globalization, this expression of solidarity that we want for revolution, happened within ALBA and led to millions of people for free to be able to see again. And because someone suffers from cataracts is just deemed to be blind for life, well, they can be cured in minutes. This is what we do with social programs. Petrocaribe was a platform. It is an energy platform to provide sustainability, energy security for the people of the Caribbean, with altruistic position of Venezuela of sharing one of the resources that leads to war in the world that no one shares, and for taking ownership over the resources of others, wars are created. Venezuela is sharing this with the community of the Caribbean. So ALBA TCP has a lot of values from its foundation for it to be broken. And I think that there's many of us who are committed to the long-lasting of ALBA. The same thing with UNASUR, even though Ecuador has left. I think that the problems have been due to this strategy of colonialism. Those who don't stand for themselves will be subject to the empire and will face the consequences of this. But those of us who defend on our convictions, the integration of Latin America and the Caribbean, aware that we can be the region with more peace, with more prosperity in the world, then history will prove us right. We're going to see how history goes by, but it has been demonstrated already. It's a real construction to see the benefits that this type of collaboration shows, this type of solidarity that is not selfish, but comes from a clear humanistic vocation. And the ECLAC stated that unity can happen within diversity. And with this position of unity, was able to build a claim for peace for Latin America and the Caribbean that today is under threat because countries want to bring in American bases in their own ground, while others from borders try to create difficult situations to tackle for the Bolivarian Revolution. But I think that we'll overcome all of this. There's a very important insight about this happening in the left wing of South America. It happened during the South American Forum in Sao Paulo, but it also happened in Cuba. The left wing of Latin America is fully aware of the challenges and what we're going to have to see in the future, in the present. We have to become more integrated. We have to be together. Only if divided, these constructions could be dissolved, destroyed, politically and socially. You've spoken about peace, and I have to ask you, what's the role of Cuba within the peace dialogues in Colombia? You're still speaking with the ELN right now, today, speaking to teleSUR. There are very important concerns about the fulfillment of agreements from the Colombian state and even from some former commanders of FARC of the agreements of Havana that then were re-agreed in Bogota. What's your perspective on Colombia's peace agreement and the position of the government to continue with this dialogue? Peace is a necessary process for Colombia, and their modest contribution for this process is due a principle to conviction. Defending peace in any place of the world is a principle, and we want to have universal peace that could ease an international economic order that's completely different. We are always guarantors for peace. We are willing to allow people to speak in our land, but we don't interfere. This is due to ethics and principles. We just facilitate for parties to speak, to solve their problems. The problems of the Colombians should be solved by Colombians without the need of having anyone else, just like Venezuelan problems should be solved by Venezuelans. That's why we need to support the Venezuelan cause. That's why we all need to support the struggle for peace in Colombia. Just two more questions, even though I have so many left in my piece of paper with drawings, just like you said during the interview. The meaning of the triumph of the election of López Obrador in Mexico in this moment of revision of all the mechanisms in the region. Mexico is a very important country in the region. Mexico is a country that Cuba cherishes. There's a lot of historic relationship as well as cultural relationship. The Generación del Centenario found a place in Mexico to be prepared for the revolution. And Mexico and Cuba have always kept a clear position. When everyone broke relationships with Cuba, Mexico kept them. But then there was an episode where things were not like this. Yes, of course. But it happened with governments, because the peoples of both countries have always been united, and this cannot be broken by anybody. López Obrador is a light of hope for Mexico, for Latin America, for the Caribbean. A left-wing government as the one of López Obrador, with his own personality as the leader of this government, balances the problems for the correlation of forces that have taken place during the last years in Latin America. López Obrador has already shown his position based on the Lima Group. And López Obrador, beyond his great commitment with the renewal of Mexico, with the development of the country, in order to keep on working, in order to stop the gaps. Is Cuba willing to help? Yes, of course, and he has called for it, and Cuba will participate and support. And we have welcomed the victory of López Obrador. When we started this interview, I asked you about these 4 months of government, the meaning of them. You spoke about your management, and then we spoke about the debates that are taking place in the Cuban society. But my last question is to yourself as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather. How have you performed your role as a father, as a grandfather during the last 4 months? How much music have you been able to listen? And this is my last question. How many times have you spoken with Raúl during these 4 months as a president? Well, let's start with the last one. I said this in an intervention in the closing session of the National Assembly that had a session in July. No one, as myself, has so much privilege as myself as a president. I am supported by the secretary of the party with all the history that he has as the leader of the revolution. I speak to Raúl Castro almost every day. He is always asking how intensely I'm speaking. He is always looking at everything that is happening. He requests information about things that are happening, about our proposals. He participates in meetings and in debates. He provides very sincere advice. But not with vanity or trying to impose anything or to limit our power with something. And in this relationship, I have a very personal feeling about this. I always feel that he's like a father to me, someone who's guiding my way, but at the same time he's allowing me to walk by myself. This is being said only personally. He's allowing us to walk, to continue, to create our own path, but doing so by fulfilling his role and his hierarchy as the secretary of the party. And I think that brings a lot of confidence to the people, just like the people felt a lot of confidence when Fidel got sick and gave the responsibility to Raúl. Fidel was always present, and Raúl stated that he was always going to ask Fidel about the fundamental problems of the nation. And people are fully aware that Raúl is present today. He is active, and he is always up to date with everything that we're doing. Therefore, everything that is being carried out, there's always a community, a group of commitments of the party, of the people, of the government, with the people. And I feel very, very secure with this, with the members of the council, with the government. We're all happy and secure because we have this guiding light and because he's teaching us and he's doing the things he does. When Raúl spoke to me, when he first told me to be the first vice president, I had never even thought about that possibility. I didn't think that I was going to be the person that should hold this position. She explained this in a way that was so paternal but so demanding at the same time, but bringing so much confidence to me, but also with the conviction that there must be continuity, because he was fully aware that when the time came, he had to let another generation rule. So he had this conviction, and he haven't given a concession. And when the people have asked to continue, he said that he needed to start with example, because he's not thinking only about today, he's thinking about the continuity of the revolution, of the future of it with the next generations. Because my generation and the next generation will never have the things that Fidel and Raúl created. So this is an experience that has the beauty of the revolution, and it is an experience that also gives a lot of beautiful examples, but also entails a big commitment. You are walking down the paths that they created. So you're taking baby steps behind two giants in their ethics, in the revolution. But at the same time, I look around and I say, I am not the only one walking. These steps are ours. So we're speaking about a collective direction, about a management where beyond this commitment, we act based on the small and the big, the strategy but the detail. And these are convictions that were provided by Fidel and Raúl. And when you visit the provinces, in the midst of so many problems, there's an educated people, people with culture but with commitment as well, a people that is fully willing to start and so entrepreneurial. They find solutions to all the problems, but it's also a very lovable people with a lot of confidence. I personally have a lot of effort in things that happen publicly. I am, well, it's difficult for me to do this. When I see people in the streets, this puts me a little bit nervous, but I always speak to the people. And I start walking towards the crowd. I talk to them, I ask them, I told them about the things that we do because people want to know if you have seen the problems. Yes, some speak to you about their problems, about what's happening, and we explain what's happening. We tell them what we are protecting as well. But people have a sense of support, not only for the person, but they see this as an expression of support for continuity of the revolution. And the first thing that you can see are the phrases, don't fail, Raúl, don't fail, Fidel. Long live Fidel, long live Raúl. But don't let them down, they say. So this provides a lot of support, but also a lot of commitment. So what a legacy I have to defend, what a great responsibility I have on my shoulders. So you have to be aware of this commitment, of this love, and you have to become stronger and go ahead, because we aren't alone. We have these people with us, and we need to work collectively. We need to allow them to participate, to allow these people to participate, as the revolution has always done. And there was a ministerial council recently, and I was speaking with the members of the government. I told them, with such a brave people, so heroic, so committed, the reason of our life, the only reason of our life is our fully commitment by doing, by working relentlessly and believing in the people, which is also believing and being faithful to the revolution, to Fidel and to Raúl. And this is my conviction. So this is also shown in the aspect of my family. You have to be social. You have to keep responsibilities of your life. You're part of that collective of friendship with people that also have responsibilities within a team. And there's also your family. I am blessed with my family, and I get from them all the understanding, all the support. Guys are very critical, and they tell me things that I need to improve, but they come from their own lives. So there's also a dialogue at home, which is the same one that we keep in the society. So it's just a storm of questions, right? Just like this interview. And I tell them, come on, we're not going to speak about this at home, but we do. It needs to be genuine, because I don't think there's any home in Cuba that is not debating the reality politically in Cuba. My wife, she's a very capable woman, and she provides a lot of support. She's an academic. She's specialized in literature and culture, specifically of Cuba. She encourages me all the time, but she is very objective when analyzing a problem, of criticizing something. She's also my counterpart at some point, and we share many interests together. Maybe all of them. So with her, I share my ideas, discussions as well. I ask her advice on some of my ideas, on some of the things that I want, on what I want to protect. I ask her for her criteria on how I drafted, how I wrote a speech. So I always have her opinion. And the rest is also shared as a family. Music, that brings so much to spirituality. We share this as well as poetry. 2 of our 3 boys are artists. So at home, whenever there's time, mainly on Sundays, at lunch, I always say, I don't know what time we'll arrive, but we're going to have lunch together. And every Sunday, even though it's late, we share lunch together. And then the kids speak to me, we sing. Are you also a singer? Well, I'm a triple singer, right? I do sing. They say that I shouldn't sing, but then they simply give up and tell me to sing whatever I want. We also share with their partners, with their friends. How about your grandson? Yes, always bringing me smiles. And now I confirm something that my mom used to tell me. You raise your children, you're very demanding. But however, you have no discipline with your grandchildren. So today we have spoken to the grandfather, President of Cuba. Thank you for your interview. No, thank you, Patricia. You know how much this means to us. teleSUR for us. Well, I don't like interviews, really. This is my first interview so far. So my friends in the Cuban press will not be so happy about this, but we will eventually speak to them as well. There's been some request of Cuba Debate to speak to me, and also from another newspaper. But no one's going to be jealous because teleSUR was the one interviewing me, because teleSUR is also from Cuba. teleSUR means Latin America, and is also the one that, as part of the media, is playing an important role for the content of the emancipation of Latin America to be part of the world, and also to be the counterpart of this expression of the media, of the colonizing expression. So thank you very much, and thank you to your collective. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that you felt at home. We're going to listen to our users on the social networks and the platforms of teleSUR, both in English and Spanish. We have spoken in the Palace of the Revolution in Havana with President of Cuba, Raul. Thank you very much. With